So today we're going to talk about the finances and the exit plan. And I want you to just think about this sentence here. 73.6% of all statistics are made up. This is kind of a funny way of saying that a lot of the numbers that you're using are going to be wrong. Even the numbers that you get from databases that look really legitimate, if you look at how some of the numbers are derived, often, as you see from this quote on the screen, they also made up numbers. So it's good to use reputable sources, but also to have a healthy dose of humility and realism, knowing that these numbers are probably going to be wrong. And so the most important part is that you are clear about your thought process. This is what will persuade people to believe in you. And the way that you can show your thought process is by indicating the assumptions that you're making. So you should be clear about the assumptions in the document, and then you should also include an assumption sheet so that people will understand the financials that you include in the business plan. Because everything flows through to the financial plan at the end of the business plan. So the first thing that you need to start with is what your vision or your goals are, and that should flow through to your strategy. Once you have a strategy, you should have some milestones to be able to follow that strategy, and finally, how you're going to exit the business. So you may not exactly know every part of this process, but it's important to start with some vision, and this business, eventually you'll need to exit it, and so you'll need to have some type of path toward that. So I'd like you to think about that. I'd like you to think about that in your groups. What would be your ideal business? What would it look like? How many employees? How many locations? What would your sales and your profit margin be? How many products would you have or services? What would you be making as a founder? Would you be looking for receiving awards? What would that look like? And I've included two videos that I think are alternative paths. One is Ben Gulak's Uno, which is a really good example from a show that is based in Canada with angel investors who are choosing whether to invest in startups. And he has a great startup, and I want you to watch that video to see why they're willing to invest in him. And I want you to think about, what do they want to get out of it, and what is their preference. And then in contrast, I'll share a video about El Bulli, which is a restaurant started by a chef who is based here in Las Vegas now, but started in Spain. And he had a very different vision and strategy. Doesn't mean that one is wrong and one is right, but you have to be clear, what is it that you want from the business. So watch those videos after this video is done. You should also think about what would be like a near failure scenario for your business. What's the decision process for saying, okay, it's time to wind things up and finish? I mean, sometimes we go a little bit too far trying to succeed and don't think about setting some markers to say, okay, if it's not working this well, then I'm going to wind down the business. You might want to think about that. Now, you're not going to put that in the business plan, but I'd like you to think about it. One of the things that you can be thinking about is, once you have a vision of where you want to go, what are your priorities or milestones for the next few years? Is it you're going to try to penetrate the market? You're going to do more advertising? You're going to try to expand to new geographies? Or are you going to try to, just get better focused on one product or service? Are you going to diversify into different products or services? These are all choices that you have to make, and they should be coherent. And those choices will guide how your business will develop. And you should be clear about that in explaining. You need to have a narrative to explain, this is what we want to do, and then that's how this translates to the financials. So you need to start with this in mind, okay? So you could write those down. And it's really helpful in the financial section if you say, these are our milestones, then you relate those milestones to the actual financial statements, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the final milestone is how you're going to exit the business. Now, if you're looking for investment from other investors. They need to exit the business somehow, and there's different ways that that can happen. Probably the most likely way to exit is a strategic acquisition. So you grow and become attractive to another company, and then they buy you. It could just be a regular sale of your assets. You could be bought out by some of the workers in your company. You may hand it down to the next generation, or you could close. Initial public offering, IPO, is when you grow enough that you can actually list your shares on a public stock exchange. That's pretty difficult to do, especially these days with many regulation requirements. But it does happen sometimes for really high growth companies. So you should, in your financial plan, you should list briefly what your milestones are. So you should mention this in the company description, but you should have 3 to 6 milestones in the financials, and then those should tie into the actual financial plan, and it should all make sense. They should be aligned.